How's it going out there, Funk fans? Professor Film in the building. Nice to see you all. It's been a while. And I would post a video regarding to a post I posted sometime this afternoon about, as it say here, want to make money, learn how to sell your debt. And my response to that actually was posted, you got two waves. Hey, how's it going, guys? I see people coming in. It says the only thing that binds you to debt is credit, and the only thing that binds you to credit is debt. And everyone, if you don't mind reposting this on your page, it'd be nice. I'll give everybody a wave. See how everybody's doing. Oops. Show some love. Poochers, when I get an opportunity, I'm gonna give you a call back. I was busy today, so just let you know. Okay. You're in the robe. Me too. You know, hey, old men will be old men. But yeah. So ultimately how to sell your debt to the government. Well, it's actually quite simple. Let's go over to Indeed, Jason. Indeed, nice to see you. All right, so I'm looking at USD, which stands for US dollar, right? It reads on the dailyfx.com. This is the most popular currency pair in the world, representing the world's two largest economies, which is EUR. EUR is standard for Europe currency, and USD is United States currency. The euro was created to facilitate cross-border trade of European trade partners, blah, 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 and talking about the general principles. Hey, how you doing, melanated? It's all interconnected. These interconnected, USD and EUR or the European dollar and the United States dollar are in comparison to being the popular demand of public denominations as far as money is concerned. But we go over to 31 USC code subsection 5112. And it goes on to say denominations, specifications, design of coins. Now, they consider this. I'm very fluent with Forex trader as well. Good, Jason. Well, here's the thing about how all this happens. You'll notice it says the Secretary of Treasury may mint and issue only the following coins. Now, even though it talks about half dollar and dollar denominations, I go through the entire thing, and here's the thing that's missing in almost all of regulated statutory premise for debt, public credit, things of this nature. There is no regulation of value. Now, they regulate trade. Are you live now? Yeah, I'm live right now. I'm live right now, my friend. So it's like it's a reality. Oh my God, he's there. Yeah, I'm human. I'm here. I'm real. So what they do is they regulate value based on trade. So if I trade with you, if I give you $100 and you give me $100 worth of product, that trade is based on, just like before it was based on weight. Now it's based on trade values. Trade values, just like Jason should know, she should be fluent in, or he should be fluent in regards to trading. Yeah, I figure you would find that funny. In trading agreements is that trading is based on supply and demand. Supply and demand is based on what's valuable or exchangeable at the commodity rate of the euro or the United States dollar. But the thing is, we're just going to stick with the USD. So USDs are not regulated with the full value of exchange. The reason why it's not backed by the full value of its exchange is because it has to have a commodity that's guaranteed against it. That means if, like, I bring in somebody and I say I'm going to employ him at the rate of $16. If the equity, fear and greed, yeah, there's a lot of that, Jason. Absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of that, my friend. The basis of practically every statutory term and condition creating debt is that they have to be regulated by some type of commercial byproduct that is bought or sold in exchange for the value of the dollar. The dollar cannot be backed by anything unless a contract or someone leviable is going to use the value in exchange for a commodity exchange or a financial instrument, which would be exchangeable at the rate in which the institution and the United States agrees on the term and condition of the value of that particular contract. And they may not go individual contracts, but they do general contracts that envelopes the market's volatility. How much it's going to make, what can it produce, how much it's going to use in access, is it going to raise enough tax revenue, and most importantly, is it going to be compulsive in its expenditures to ensure the government's arm is extended outward to receive the benefits that's necessary to keep it running and fully functional, which is to otherwise keep the coffers of the federal government's books open. Okay, to keep its entries going, it needs something in exchange for the value of the Federal Reserve note that they're issuing. They got to say something in the denomination has to be equitably guaranteed that it's going to create the same value, meaning your labor equal to a contract, equal to the value of the economy that's built on the principle of what you do as a profession. It equates to the equitable relief that is offered to the banks then offer to the companies, and the companies ultimately compensate you for in exchange for your equitable process, which is you producing equity, debt, credit, whatever they need to ledger off of to pledge basically your future labor or the debt in which the future labor is going to produce in order to credit the future contract on the basis of production. All right, so also, if you guys, please, everybody that's coming in, repost this if you don't mind. But like I said, the United States dollar is not regulated by value. It's regulated by financial exchanges, contracts, and obligations. That means if I promise or agree to pay a certain amount of money to a bank, it will lend me credit in the equitable sum of what they think I could return on the basis of what my credibility may be. It could be I have tons of equity or tons of credit, or I have tons of debt, and that's tradable because some other third party wants to use it for financial underwriting purposes or wants to use it for equitable purposes and create, they want to monetize the debt so that they can pledge something that will further the consideration, yes, Mr. Poutras, in the access of it can be economical credit, it can be local credit, it can be any form of credit or debt, because debt ultimately exceeds credit, and credit pays off debt by creating more debt. So it's like you can't really win. There is no such thing as relief because debt is created by credit, and credit creates debt. No way out. I don't know where everybody gets the assumption that you can just zero a balance out. It doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way. The economy just doesn't zero out the balance, and you go on about your sovereign credit way like you just zeroed out everybody else's balance, therefore you don't have to pay for it and everything's good. No, there's policies to raise more revenue than there is debt because we don't create enough. We don't have enough equity to create an economy that backs and levies the guarantee of future commerce, which exceeds the production of the credit, which usually never happens. It's only happened 2 times in history, and their surplus was solely based on production. Okay, and that was Germany and that was China. Okay, and those particular industries were created to ferment an exchange that can grow substantially and never cease to revenue itself without creating debt. And there's only 2 places that it ever happened where surpluses exceeded their means of creating debt, because they didn't need it, because their access was spent on the population, which ultimately groomed them to create more credit and thus lend more money to the government. And then the government turned around and said, well, there's no need for debt as long as we have savings, which guarantees the future of your children. If you don't have savings in a market where there is too much debt, when you crash, you're not going to have anything to exchange for the balance of what you're equitably saying that you're valued at economically, locally, government-wise, financially. Just won't have anything to exchange it with. Nothing to exchange with a debt that exceeded its savings bonus to continue to operate on or operate as the Mirandi of public policy, which is to create more credit instead of debt. But because we're in bankruptcy since 1933, there is no credit, because the only way to get credit is you have to have debt. Have to have debt. Your debt could be any number of exchangeable values, such as a credit check is considered a debt evaluation. The value of your you got out of college and you got a big transcript and I went to Yale and here's my degree. That is valued at debt to create the credibility ratio of what you're going to be valued in the future. So in essence, and remember guys, please repost this. That'd be wonderful. You'd be doing a great job, great good thing. It needs to happen. If it doesn't, it just really suck. That's all. It's a person, probably as an individual as well. So I'm just joking. So so this whole thing that we're dealing with, debt. You walk into a bank. How do you sell your money? How do you sell your debt to the bank? Okay, so of course I've already went through the whole 18 USC subsection 8, respect the effort and share. Yes, thank you very much. Melanated Stargate, yes, damn it is the right answer for that. So 18 USC subsection 8, let's look it up real quick. And I've pointed this out. People use it for their legal arguments, but what they don't understand is that the legal jargon of the section actually produces credit out of thin air. Why don't people read it? Because, well, they think they know, or they don't know and they try to understand, but they don't know how to use the formality of the language, which doesn't benefit you if you can't read it. So the term obligation or security of the United States. Now, here's the reason why they put it in quotation. Is because they're making this synonymous with the wording they're going to use thereafter. So it says includes all bonds, certificate of indebtedness, national bank currency, Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes. If I go to a bank and I say, is this a Federal Reserve note? And ignorance is bliss. Absolutely, Jared. You're absolutely right about that. So I go into the bank and I say, this is a Federal Reserve note. They say, yes, that's a Federal Reserve note. I say, great. I say, well, does this fall under 18 USC subsection 8? Now, I might pull it out so that their benevolence of ignorance, their blissfulness not to know, comes to the fruition of, oh, well, it does seem to fall under this particular section. I say, great. Okay, now, here's the thing. I don't want to give you my money. This is where it gets very confusing. I want to give you my money, but what I want to do is I want to give you a bond. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bond that's exchangeable for this dollar, and this dollar won't be spent for the next, I don't know, 5 months, 10 months, a year, whatever. And the interest rate on this bond is to be shared with the Treasury, and then the Treasury has to do one of two things. They have to take this and monetize it and pay the interest back to its investors, and then alleviate me from its usage as debt and enable me to borrow against it and use it as free-flowing currency. In other words, I want to zero the balance out by making it a non-tradable guarantee, and I don't want to borrow against it, but I get a zero interest guarantee, and my loan is paid off the same time that I borrow the money. Now, there's no value in that. But what you don't understand is that when you do that, it goes on your credit report. It goes on there as a loan paid. Let's say you're doing that with every paycheck you have. Now you're creating credit out of thin air. Now, what I mean by that is, okay, credit report. Goes on your credit report. Great. All right, what about money? How does money, this debt, how does the security turn into an actual guarantee? Now, here's how it gets really, really good. You can take it to the bank and say, by holding this, I'm now going to turn around and sell the security to a third party. Here we go. Nice robe. I know someone's gonna poke something out. I have a blue one. Thank you, Jason. I thought you were making fun there I took one short look at it. I said, yeah, somebody's gonna say something crazy. Yeah, yeah, I like it, man. You know what I'm saying? It keeps your brother warm around here. Cold nights. Anyway, so Federal Reserve notes turn into a bond, and now you give the bond to the bank. You say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find investors to, here we go, dollar for dollar, okay? Where can we get this info in detail? I'm reading it to you. Apparently you're not looking it up. This is where everybody fails. They're not listening. So, and you're talking about my robe, so that's unimportant right now. And it's distracting me. His words are details, yes. 18 USC subsection 8. That's where you'll find obligations or other securities of the United States. Okay, so bonds act as a remote to borrow against. Now you have the bond being held at the bank. Bank holds the bond, but just to make sure that they know you're not playing games, you're actually giving them the money. But you tell them they can only put it in escrow. This is how you mortgage your debt. This is how they mortgage a house to you. This is how they mortgage credit cards to you. This is how they mortgage any debt that you want to accelerate and use as a means of buying asset value or asset value exchangeable items, such as TVs, houses, development, flooring, anything that you need as a means of exchange, a medium of exchange. So Federal Reserve notes are now bonds. They're holding your bond, and then they're holding your money, and they're securitizing. Uh-oh, here we go. Wait a minute. What do we got? In your robe at this corner. God, question. Listen to what he's saying and then go back and follow along the acts. Watch first, then do. Exactly. Thank you very much, my Canadian friend, Mr. Poutras. You are on board. If I had just a round of applause here, I'd give you, love Canada. We love Canada. We really do. I like you guys, though. I really do. You guys are pretty cool. But, and these people got to be wrapped up. So this turns into something else. You're a bad man. Thank you very much, Jason. Let's not put that in such bold content. We have the people watching, by the way. Probably. Who knows? I don't care. So Federal Reserve notes turn into bond money because now you're able to finance something. They're holding your money in escrow. Let's see here. Answer questions later. Thank you very much, Melanated. So exchangeable rates on what you're lending. You can now remember they can facilitate trade at a certain interest rate where they'll say it can only go to a particular threshold. But what they didn't tell you is that every dollar can be sold at the same interest rate and thus up the threshold on each particular dollar as a denomination of its own. So in essence, you can have a dollar for, let's say the amount you can borrow or lend could be 10%. For the entire note. What the bank and the Federal Reserve notes, the Federal Reserve didn't tell you is that they can hypothecate 10% for each dollar, which overvalues the actual contract and therefore enables a future contract to guarantee that in the future that's going to be worth 10%. Each dollar is going to be worth 10%. So the sell value is the exchange ratio of credit you're going to be able to borrow and then either lend or allocate to another resource in which will be payable to, and then thereof in the future, you can turn around and lax your credit by writing things off that you just created credit for. So you got a bond, you got a Federal Reserve, you got a Federal Reserve note. These are both at the bank. Now you get to write it off, and the bank turns around and sells the interest at par to not only pay for the debt that you just created, but the bond turns around and ends up on the secondary or first or the first market or the first secondary of the first marketplaces to sell to investors, debt holders, subcontractors, financial. But then remember, there's a teeter-totter. When you're creating credit, you're also turning around and creating attached debt for the general public, which is to access the credit of the public and introduce a means of creating more debt than there is credit, which is exactly where balancing it out by solidifying your debt to the general public by writing it off. Writing it off actually writes off the debt from being hypothecated in the first place. When you write it off and your debtor end of your contract says that once that is paid in full on your bond, it facilitates the trade that guarantees you no longer have to worry about that Federal Reserve note taxing a third party to introduce a means of revenue for the government. The government should be literally at a zero balance in this fiscal and allowing the public to trade. Because the public can't trade, then the fiscal balance is going to allow, and has always allowed, the United States government to create policies to dictate commerce. As long as you're not controlling your commerce with contracts, they are dictating your commerce with contracts. If you don't go to the bank and sell your debt to the bank with bonds, notes, other forms of financial securities, it says here Federal Reserve bank notes, coupons, shit, go into the bank and ask what a Federal Reserve bank note is. They may actually have them. Be surprised. United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates, silver certificates, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks. Checks can be bonds and other notes and other financial instruments. Remember that even though it says checks, checks doesn't mean that it can't mean coupon, Federal Reserve note, or Treasury note, because they're tradable. When you give it to them, they're trading it by trading you something in exchange for something they're going to be able to index and make money from in the future. All right. It says checks, drafts for money drawn by or authorized officers of the United States, stamps and other representatives of value or whatever denomination issued under this act of Congress and Council of the United States stamps. That means issued under any act of Congress. That means any act that allows you to use bonds, notes, or any other debt instrument ultimately goes right back to this. This is the clause in which connects all their credit and debits that allows you to facilitate trade, solidify, pay for, subcontract for, finance and underwrite your job. You work at a job, well, that contract that you're employed under is the way that the company, even though it's usually typically in the surplus because it'll wind up borrowing money, that's debt, leviable against your credit, your future credit, which is your income, that is going to be levied for taxable purposes so that the company can pay the Treasury its fair share of its income, which is another way of saying that we borrowed the money, we're going to allow you to tax our employees and employers in the effects of creating credit for the United States. The United States is going to bundle it up, put it in a policy, and then lend it back to the same industries, which typically doesn't always happen like that because when you're solidifying money, the bank always squeezes at the interval of realizing that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, your growth isn't as beneficial as it typically thinks it is because they may not make as much revenue as you assume you'll make in the next season or the next quarter or the next annual balance sheet. They don't know that. So they're just speculating that the assumption is you will because you can produce it. In other economies, typically, unless the labor laws are extremely tight and the lax commoditization of ensuring that revenue will be a ongoing applicable process that the Treasury of the state or the Treasury of the city, county, municipal, even the federal government sees that they regulate the deregulation of laxing those principles will ensure. Let's say that they're tightening them. They're now having to ensure a specific policy withholding the guarantee that those things are going to be implemented and enforced. That's more revenue for the United States and the state, whoever the enforcement arm is, and it's less credit to the company because these regulations are stringent to ensure certain things happen, which ultimately put them in a place where they have to be either compromising or they have to take those expenditures and come out of pocket. When they come out of pocket, doesn't benefit them. Okay? Doesn't benefit anybody that comes out of pocket. All right? So, so what happens is, okay, boys and girls, is that when they have loose means of being able to broaden the scope of labor laws that allows a bigger chunk of the commodity of the community to be able to allow more terms and conditions to be more flexible. The domestic commodities, the companies and the banks are more easy with credit. They're more they'll see things more valuable on the premise that there is a guarantee that compensating someone to keep these type of rules laxed and open makes it less volatile, less hostile, easier to commoditize and otherwise sell to the general public, because you see that there's a means of capitalization where the stringent activity of a corporation is under a stronghold of using its finances for the same purpose of protecting itself, yet at the same time keeping away from winding up breaking or breaching some type of regulation that they are going to be liable for. So ultimately, regulations do no good for anybody. It doesn't benefit the general public, and it doesn't credit the institution. It's just another formality of soliciting a means of showing their credibility is in question, or whether or not their credibility is in question, whether or not the regulation is good for the consumer or is it good for the company, which ultimately, again, is going to dictate whether or not the labor probability of enhancing labor practices in places where there isn't enough money, people aren't producing enough, and otherwise folks just don't have money out of pocket to spend on that particular consumer entity or entity that is selling consumer products or services, ultimately are going to be able to it's going to be able to use its own credibility for forwarding its commercial activities. So again, 18 U.S.C. subsection 8, obligation of the securities of the United States as defined, tells you all of the things you can trade with the United States, the banks, its financial institutions, its representatives, and all of its financial aggregations when it comes down to local finance and governance. Now, again, the bottom line is that when it comes down to the representation of value, the bank does not regulate the value. It's just very important to understand is that money is not regulated by value by the banks, because the bank's only denomination is trading in the denomination of the notes that are being sold to them, not that they're selling to the public. So if you go in and say, I want $100 in $5 bills, they're not regulating $100 bills, they're regulating $5 bills. So those $5 bills are based on, let's say the trade assumption is that each $5 is going to fractionalize into $10 increments in 50 years. Well, then I want to buy $5, increment it for a 50-year bond, 50-year bond, and now I'm going to give you this bond, and I'm only going to have you hold that in escrow. And when I receive this money, I'm going to make it a deposit to loan my money to the Federal Reserve for the interest rate. Again, this is all trade. It's all trade. It's telling them that you're producing capital where there is none, and then telling the Federal Reserve to introduce a means of crediting that 50-year guarantee with its investors or financial representatives that want to borrow against or leverage your money to purchase future indemnified contracts. That is to put it into context. They want to put it into a policy, loan it, lease it, guarantee it to something else, in which now they can turn around and say, well, look what we did. We created all these jobs and opportunities because all these people over here were leasing all their debt to us, and now we can turn around and create new industries that everybody's been asking for. You want money, you got to create it. The only way to create it is to trade it. Without trading it, then you stay at an interest rate in which will fluctuate based on what the government is guaranteeing you. In the future, today, tomorrow, in 10 years, or in the next 30 minutes, depending on... And I look at the Foreign-X, and I look at the division on here. They determine this if I'm not trading it. If I'm not trading it, they're determining the factoring of what the numbers are going to represent based on what the commodities is being sold, bought, and traded on. And because I don't have a platform for it, then who's going to make the money? The traders are going to make the money. The investors are going to make the money. The banks are going to make the money. Everybody's going to make money but us. Everybody's going to make money, but the people that are supposed to be trading the same debt in the forms of credit that keeps them out of our pockets in the first place, which is, again, a part of industrialization of using policy to finance the public in means of being that they want you as a dependent. They need dependents because they're not, dependents don't create credit. They simply trade debt in exchange for policy money. It's, well, I'm not going to go way back in time, but again, 18 U.S.C. subsection 8, the very end of this section, issued under any act of Congress, should be almost absolutely punctual when it comes down to trading any particular denomination of credit, debt, charge off, whatever you happen to be using as an instrument to go to the bank and say, I want to buy my debt. Because they're looking at you and they're saying, well, if that's a security feature of your debt, well, how much do you want to borrow? What do you have to borrow against? What's guaranteed? If you ask the bank, how much is my money trading at? And you say, here's the USD, here it is right here, here's the chart, here's how much it says it's trading at. How much is the value of my money? See, the difference between you being a trader and them solidifying money to you is that you're the one that determines what the value is going to be. Because even though the market determines the volatility of trade, it doesn't create the value of what your money happens to be. If you turn around and bring someone in to audit your account, you're going to say how much money, even though they give you an interest rate, the bank gives you an interest rate because it's fluctuating on the same public accountability of what the Treasury says the value of trade is. Has nothing to do with the bank itself. The bank just simply is involved in that by putting money into it and debiting your account as a means of funding other apparatuses, just like it can't hypothecate its own money. I mean, we're talking about banks. Some of the largest banks have just a few $100 million, yet they can sponsor billion-dollar contracts, and yet they don't have all the money that's available in order to trade all this money. But what they're doing is they're turning around and using the hypothecated trading principle of everyone that's using the money in circulation. So they're using debt to hypothecate credit and then sell it to the general public by means of giving it to a company who then accompanies you, the consumer, to say, I have a job and opportunity for you, which creates the debt that's necessary to be taxed for. And in the future, at the end of the day, you're facilitating a beautiful trade-off. I'm going to watch this video for weeks. You're welcome, Jason. Absolutely. Yeah. And, we need to talk about your situation too. I almost forgot about that. We got to hit each other up. I don't know why you can't see me either. That's kind of odd. So, sure. All right. Okay, so, definitely. Yes, Jason. Yes, Jason. So it's going to be here. It's not going anywhere. Just repost it anywhere and everywhere. Show some love. Show some love. So, all it is based on commodity and trading, and this is all packaged under the auspice of hypothecating debt that's already available or credit that is created by those in which demand it. Now, when we demand policy, we're demanding Congress, hey, do something to balance the economy. They say, okay, all right. What scheme do we have? Could we come up with something? We got a tech bubble. Looks good. Let's fund it. They write up a contract, which basically turns into a bill. Bill turns into finances. They're already influenced by the industry because they're getting paid by that same industry, asking for more funding in order to, or deregulations or specific regulations that would keep them in, whether they want to compact it so that they can keep a stringent absolute on the commoditization of a particular industry, which means they can kind of tighten their noose around it and no one can get a hold of it. Or, Signal probably sucks. I'm sorry. As far as this feed is concerned. But they can use, okay, so Congress is receiving money to pass bills to finance this industry. And if of course, like Microsoft didn't struggle to get on its feet, and it had so much power and finances available to it, and it didn't expend enough for the government to feel like it had an absolute means of control over it, it felt that it had a global effect, which ultimately had to be broken up as a monopoly because they felt that Microsoft just simply had no competitors to defeat its main purpose, which is the goal is to control all computers. That was too much for the government and a lot of the globalist financial institutions that felt that they had to use Microsoft products. That in and of itself is too broad for someone to control absolutely. So they broke up Microsoft and they broke up other industries that made sure that they couldn't radar, which is basically kind of like, okay, and we just buy everything up and crushed all the markets and then forced them out. Mom and pop shops were a prime example of how trade winded up happening with Walmart. Walmart was created out of the idea that super or large commodity areas of foodstuffs, exchanges, and valuable items that were necessary for the local individuals, in general, the general population. They said, how do we devise a means of getting rid of all the middlemen who actually are necessary in the communities and make giant commodities of the same things that they're selling, the same things they have to offer, and the same community sense of togetherness. And they came up with Walmart. Walmart was a perfect scheme. It came in and basically devoured all the mom and pops and everyone else because they took the idea of don't struggle with us, public. Allow us to use your credit. We're going to go to the bank and we're going to finance this using all these other community-based companies, and we're going to consolidate them into one institution. And by doing that, they ultimately went to the banks and said, we'll make it cheaper, more affordable, but we'll make you more money over time. So at the end of the day, mom and pop store couldn't possibly go up against that unless their competition, unless the Walmart played into the competition's hands by commoditizing them, which who would feed their enemy if they're making money? It doesn't make any sense. So Walmart was like, at the end of the day, we'll make it easy for you by allowing you to work for us instead of us work for you. Ultimately, the corporation was like, we don't need you to work for yourself. We need to have you work for us in order to dictate the ultimate principle of trade, which is ultimately to keep you from winding up being more independent than you need to be in order for Walmart to survive, and you otherwise to serve the commodity and the agency called Walmart in order to provide a significant equitable trade-off of what we are as an institution, which is to keep you out of business, to keep your business from flourishing, and more importantly,
it's 12 o'clock.
It's 12 o'clock. So to keep you from winding up doing something that we have no control over. This is exactly why institutions come in to buy things up. They come in to control it, not to influence it, not to help it, not to enjoy it, not to take a piece and go home. No, to control it, absolutely. Let's see here. The local businesses, owners up. Yep. Apple is 5 to 10% of the market. Nerds and TV people, except me, use it primarily. Yes, this is very true, Mr. Poochers. And Jared, yeah, with the vulgar. Got you on that note. So, but just to generalize this construct here and just put it in a nutshell, keep running off of the mouth here. Again, please repost this when you have an opportunity. That would be great. I appreciate it. Thumbs up. Send it to your people. Put in your private groups. The United States dollar, or the Federal Reserve note, is considered a trading commodity. It's considered a trade module for solidifying the public and introducing a means of its own credit, its own debt, and who can barter its usage in exchanges, in contracts and financial representations of value. And the fact that still remains is that there is no value in the law. The only value is just the sign, which is the dollar sign, but no value is carried after because there's no absolutes in markets. If I go and create something, and even though the market volatility says what I'm selling is worth $20, I can sell it for 10. So equitably, when it comes down to competition, it's about the value of the exchange as opposed to what the dollar itself is valued at. You got to stop looking at the value of the dollar and look at the exchange itself. If I go and buy a meat product from Walmart and I go up in there and I say, hey, that's kind of funny. You guys bought it at, you bought this chicken for 17, maybe let's say $2.13. You're asking me to pay $15.18. Now, the only other thing I can see that overvalues this is the labor that was put into it. But let me ask you who exactly I'm paying. In other words, where's the equitable interest in each leviable instant of making it worth $13 as opposed to a fraction of the same price that you're selling it for? And fractionalized banking is the same exact way. They're saying that the value of the exchange is based on what you produce as opposed to what is being projected on paper. In other words, the projection on paper can change at any given time. Chicken go from $16 per bird to $25 per bird. Why? Because the market volatility, the way the market is responding is going to be based on the value of the exchange. Again, if you're not in the market, if you're not selling, buying, or exchanging, then you're pretty much a liability. You're trying to hoard assets of debt that they're allowing you to have in savings, and you're not using it to perpetuate a means of growth, development, and an educational way of producing access production. Yes, that is correct. Whoops, I accidentally pinned that. That is correct, Jarrett. Let's see here. That's kind of funny. I don't know why I did that. Okay. Whoops. What is this? Oh, okay. So you said production performance. So yes, that's the market volatility. Tesla, yeah, that's another way. Here's the thing about Tesla versus, say, versus GM at the time. Tesla did not have a market to sell to, as opposed to GM creating a market that they wanted to sell to. And Tesla would have ultimately brought down the market volatility because the value of energy. Let's see, hold on. Tesla is an example. Is Tesla an example? It operated as a loss for so long. Yes, correct. The reason why is because free energy does not commoditize the value of dollars. Let me say that one last time so that people can understand how simple this is. A free enterprise does not regulate financial representation of dollars. It's impossible. So free stuff does not mean free. Free means exchangeable at the rate of either debt, which is a write-off, or credit, which is in the future to sell you something that they're presenting as free, but at the end of the day actually has a value exchangeable in debt or in credit, depending on whichever side of the asphalt you are as far as production. If you're production and your exceeded production performance is that of middle class, or you're at the lower class and you're used to something free and access for a specific amount of time, which ultimately will morph into a debt eventually if you decide to continue to move forward in its usage. Yes, it's very mind-blowing, Mr. Poochers. There is no such thing as free. We and everybody in general, when they say free, what they mean is something is attached to it to either write it off or create credit from it, or a debt to it. There's going to be something to it. If you get an offer in the mail, we want to offer you the newspaper for the next 3 months for free. But you didn't read the stipulations. You definitely didn't read the fine print. And there's always something at the bottom, real small, saying that in 30 days, if you decide not to blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Hold on, guys. It's the only thing getting blown right now. Well, that's nice. Yeah. You should get a wife. Yeah. She might blow dollar signs into you. I don't know. Yeah, that was a sick joke, I know. So in essence, to free to grab. Yeah, free to grab, not to have. That is correct. Matter of fact, believe it or not, I think our friend, what's his name again? Trump, I think he might even wrote grabbing somebody off on his taxes. Why? Because he used that as a deduction, almost like a child income credit for someone that you take care of. So when he like for instance, when he donated that money to that woman that claimed that he had sexual nuptial agreements with her in the bed and had some extracurricular activity, that was a tax write-off. That was a donation. That was a donation, and the court sanctioned it. They said, we totally understand. She is just a child with no like mind of understanding the institution of debt. So we don't think you're a debtor, Trump. Just slide her some money. We'll write it off. You'll get the exchange. You can put the burden on the taxpayer. Put it in a bill. We'll sign off on it. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Yep, that's why he ain't going down. That is correct. Because it's all about money. It's monetary policy. It's guaranteed that the future is based on what he can produce. His performance is the basis of his antics, the basis of keeping everybody confused and totally looking and focusing in on it and honing in on him and not looking at Congress. Congress is your number one. That is the criminal group of all enterprises on the planet right now. You have 400 members that dictate the way things are being used, monetized, financed, traded, you name it. If it's in the Constitution or statutorily required or statutorily mandated, quote unquote, by their laws, and they're used against others and they don't understand what that statutory representation of value in exchange for what they're commoditized to do in the form of labor, sex, war, all of that, and they're not involved in that and don't understand what their local government is using to modify or exchange with that, then you're in deep water playing with these people. When I say deep water, I mean you really don't know what they're doing. Him looking rich is how they fool people on his acting agent. Yes, he's acting. Here's the thing. I'm an acting agent. I have a state identification card. I am an active agent. I am not an active agent in the sense of a revenue agent, because if I was a revenue agent, then I'd be working for somebody. I would be working for them, and then I'd be producing their credit, their debt, and I would have access to means of the labor that allows me to use my performance to create credit out of thin air and then leverage it with more debt, such as a new house, such as a new car, all that little rinky-tinky stuff that's based on using the market volatility. As long as the market volatility is equitable in how much I trade and how much I use, how much in excess I have, how much in credibility that I have as far as what I've built in debt and contractual finances that apply to my credit, my credit's applicable apparatus, then intuitively any public individual that understands exactly how the source of debt works would understand that that's what it's all about. Even reporting credit is all about reporting debt instruments that you've agreed to pay in some way, shape, or form. It's all debt. All of it's debt. Now, credit, on the other hand, is your debtor saying you know how to create money out of thin air. That's what that is. You can go to any bank and say, can I credit my account? They'll say, yeah. And you say, I'd like $5 or $10. They're like, you say you're going to credit your account. You say, well, you said I'm a creditor, right? You say, well, yeah, the application says you're a creditor. I said, okay. Now, you're not borrowing credit. You're saying, give me credit. Credit is exchangeable. That means if I give you a check, you give me $100 back. That's credit. If I borrow that and then I leverage that to use the account to charge something off, then I'm saying that the balance is already there. That's a debit. That's debt. Credit is that it doesn't have to be there and you can create that out of thin air. And then they give you an agreement to repay it back in the future. Thus, where the labor rackets came in to unionize and formulate a means of kind of a chokehold on certain industries, so that when industries controlled the vote of the entity then voted for politicians. It voted for special interests. It voted for its policies to guarantee new contracts and new finances to guarantee the future of its commoditization, which is to bring in new workers, innovate its new trade, things that, new equipment, you name it. It's all about financing the obligation of an institution that wants more debt that exceeds the credit that it has, or wants to create more credit, in which is debt, can levy the balance on what it can do in the future, which is to otherwise squeeze the middleman, anybody that ultimately is going to, hey, how's it going? How's it going, Connie? Whoever is going to borrow the future of that credit is going to be the debtor at the end of the day. But if your credit is leveraged and you're not borrowing the money, and you're allowing the investors to buy it back dollar for dollar, and you're allowing the public to use it for the same purpose of raising their revenue, then ultimately you're the equitable exchange site. You're the one creating the equity and then telling the bank how much you want back based on the investment that you've exceeded in creating more credit than they have in debt. And when you have a balance of credit at zero, you start moving up once your contracts start talking about how much in trade they can use it for. Now you're in control of what your money is doing, how it functions, who's going to buy it, who's going to sell it. Your friends can buy it. They can have a contract saying that I'm going to buy X amount of dollars from his account based on their employment contract, and the employer is paying that money to their account. They have to pay that with interest to you, because that note is being floated to the United States Treasury, is floated to the local treasury, floated to an investor and other financial exchangers, because now the labor is exceeding the amount of debt that is creating. So it no longer becomes a taxable commodity. And now you have trade. You have trade because I'm giving you my money in exchange for my labor is now giving you my money. And my money now in the future is guaranteed to create interest on the principle of you holding a note against my contract. And now the bank's like, oh, okay, sure. They give you access to credit. Meanwhile, I'm working. And I'm working my money off, and the interest and the debt itself is being held by a third party that you sold it to. And now they're turning around and introducing it to another marketplace who is ultimately redeeming that debt back. You're paying nothing. You have a free line of credit ultimately, because, well, that's a whole different story. We're not going to get into how you use the money in such a way that the redemption, again, you have two options. I will give those options: write off or a tax credit, which ultimately either one of two things. It does one of two things: either writes off what you borrowed, or it credits how much you're going to use in allowing others to use your credit, which is my labor lending my money to you, and you're equitably insured in the future to be able to leverage that money for whatever amount it may be on the balance that you're going to either write it off, because my contract is facilitating the trade. Not you. You're not doing anything. Just like my credit. If I go in and I say I got, they want to look at my IRS statements. They want to look at how much money I'm making. And then, more importantly, they want to see where I'm employed at. They want to find out whether or not my equitable contract with the company is the balance of what I'm economically able to provide or repay if I borrow money or if I decide to buy a house or something like that, because they're looking at the market volatility, and they're looking at my income, and they're looking at my taxes, and they're looking at how I'm accountable as far as my credit, what my credit looks like, because they want to shore up any debt that they're going to create, and know that in the next 10 years they're going to make X amount of dollars. In the next 20 years they're going to make X amount of dollars. Now remember, they're borrowing that already in advance of notes that you're ultimately going to borrow. But again, debt is credit, and credit is debt. They're one and the same, and you got to stop trying to separate them. And public is private, and private is public. The reason why is because if I do a public contract by filing something into a deeds office or recorder's office, that's up for public speculation. If I put a private contract in and they make it public, it's still a public contract. If I send a public contract to them to file into their public books, and it frames as being a liability to them, they could take it as a private contract and make it equitable the same way as if they had it on the public books. But it's still for public acknowledgement, or for that matter, especially if you get exempt to have it written off. And privately, you can have the same way as you did publicly as far as getting the acknowledgement or the accolades to your negotiation. So public and private are one and the same. Debt and credit are one and the same. They're all in the same room. If you look on your dollars, you have a claim in which your money can be paid for public and private debt and its usages, which is the interpretation of one and the same. If 1 + 1 are equal to one another, and even though you put a plus sign in the middle, which would value at 2, it's still 1 and 1. The division is 1 and 1. 1 and 1 equals 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Same values. It comes down to what exactly matches the other. So a man and a woman, that matches. A man and a man, a woman and a woman. That doesn't quite add up. So, bottom line is this, all right? Everything that has a match has a guarantee to match the equity, match the debt, match the agreement, match the contractual obligation, matching a grant, for instance, such as being able to write something off, create credit elsewhere, and then turn around and use the match of debt versus credit to offset one another so that they can balance one another out. That's what a man and woman is supposed to do. That's what the economy and the people are supposed to do. That's what the land and our economical minds is supposed to do. That's what the water and our vibrations to keep it clean is supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do naturally. But there's no natural law. Everything is artificial, and we have to think artificially. We have to think and build artificially. We have to manage, manifest, and create in the most diluted sense of illusions. So you guys enjoy yourself this afternoon. It's nice discussing this with you. Remember, debt is credit. Credit is debt. They're one and the same. They're a man and a woman. Find balance in this very disturbed and retarded economy. I'll let y'all in a minute. It's Professor Phil. You know how to get a hold of me. I'm in the building. Please repost this. Send it to all your people. I don't care who they are or what they are. You get a hold of me, you're welcome, Mr. Pooches. You're absolutely welcome. Of course, I can be reached at 919-400-2949 or 424-245-9408, or my email, profphil @politicsandmoneyinc.com. That is PHIL PROF at POLITICSANDMONEYINC.com. I'll let y'all in a minute. Mr. Pooches, I'll call you in a minute, man. I'm tired, so yeah, I'm out. Peace.